Hello, my beautiful soul. Today we are talking about taking your power back and setting healthy boundaries, especially if this is something you've struggled with in the past. And if you are, like me, a very heart-centered, sensitive, possibly intuitive or empathetic being, right? I know a lot of the people who I attract into my world are very similar to me in that you have such a big heart, and the last thing you want to do is to hurt someone or cause problems, and yet in this fear or this avoidance, then you can end up people pleasing and you can end up dishonoring yourself in an attempt to make sure the other person is happy or avoid rocking the boat. So, if you can relate, you are in the right place. That is my life's story. And I want to share a really powerful experience when I started shifting this because it was a pattern I'd had my whole life, and I had done such deep healing work around it for ages. I was aware that this was my pattern. I was also aware of the ways I had learned it from my childhood and the different things that had kind of caused it or created it to be my normal. But I was still struggling to actually embody the changes and take up more space and really honor and protect my voice, my needs, my boundaries, all the things. So, this was like a few years back when I was still pretty new to quantum healing hypnosis work, but I had already noticed huge, huge changes in my life from it. And at this point, I had become quite receptive to the process because I had spent years before that really deeply uh, deconditioning and like clearing out a lot of the blocks and the illusions and the distortions around myself and how the world works and just the mental chatter that used to be constant. So I wanted to preface that and just make the note that I had done so much work up until this point, but this particular example came after just doing one powerful hypnosis. So it's also showing just how incredible these shifts can be when you're already in the right state, and then you have that extra support to kind of take you over the edge or really jump into the next version of you. So I have a free hypnosis recording called my Queen Hypnosis. And this is what I did. This is the exact hypnosis I used for myself in this situation. So if you want to check it out, it'll be linked below for you to dive into. And other practices that I used have now become part of my Empower bundle, which is a quantum healing hypnosis course all about personal empowerment. So it's really, really incredible at helping you shift your subconscious beliefs around yourself, around what you deserve, and the standards that you're setting for your life, and also for the energetic healing work to rewrite your energetic signature so that you start to attract different things and that you believe you're worthy of even better, right? So you can check that out in the links below as well. Now, let's get into the juicy story. So, I was back home and I was spending time with family and extended family, and I was in an environment that has always been a challenge for me. And I remember even as a little girl, back before my brother passed away, so back in like my teenage years, it was something that was a challenge then, and where I just felt so unseen and unheard and dismissed, and like my boundaries didn't matter, or like they literally didn't even exist. Like I felt so invisible that oftentimes it just caused me to retract or hide away, and Yet internally, I get more and more frustrated because I was like, why am I not being seen? And why are these people not respecting my boundaries? But I wasn't consciously expressing them at the time. I was kind of looking outside of myself for an adult to become the savior or the protector. I wasn't getting that, and it just led to like a vicious cycle. Because as you may have noticed in your own life, when something happens in one area and it becomes really strong, it becomes a pattern, it typically repeats in other areas too. So, my lack of confidence, my lack of ability to speak up for myself and take up space here actually is very reflective in a lot of other circumstances throughout my life from that point on, because I just would try to hide, I would try to avoid, I would hope it would magically get better without me having to be the one having the uncomfortable conversation, and it never changed. So the point came a few years ago where the situation was repeating, the pattern was repeating, and I had all this awareness about the quantum realm and the ways in which we have to change, right? And how energy changes matter. So I knew I didn't want to react or be rude or be snappy, although I still had internalized so much that there was a little bit of me that wanted to just like erupt and not lose it, but just like kind of, yeah, erupt and get really vocal and express the years of things I'd been suppressing. But I also am pretty good at emotionally regulating, I would say. So I didn't want to do that. But then I was like, okay, Kara, what would you do? What would like Quantum Queen Kara do, who knows how this stuff works, who understands the quantum realm of energetics, and who really understands the subconscious and the power that what we focus on grows. I knew that if I continued to focus on the things I didn't like, I would just amplify it and I would increase the energetic charge. I would create more of it, even though I didn't want it, just because of how powerful each of us are with our energy, right? And I tapped into, this is no longer something I want to tolerate. This is no longer something I will settle for. I have to raise my standards if I want this situation to change. And I realized I literally had to take matter into my own hands and take energy into my own hands. And so I went and did my queen hypnosis. I've really had such a deep release in that experience of seeing the ways in which I had continuously abandoned myself by hiding and just disappearing and avoiding in hopes that things would magically get better, instead of speaking up for myself and feeling confident in my ability to speak up for my needs but still have kindness, right? Like, I think I had this underlying fear that it would hurt someone else's feelings when it wasn't even rude. It wasn't mean, it wasn't nasty, it was just me asking for something different and asking to be more respected and be more seen and stuff like that. So it was this huge, deep release. And then in that hypnosis, you connect to yourself as the queen. And I don't focus on, the evil queen villains that we see a lot of times, or some of the stereotypical queen energy that has a lot of those lower level characteristics. So for me, it's like this really beautiful, empowered, embodied, divine feminine who is leading by how she holds herself and commanding changes, but with kindness, right? And a lot of times just commanding it through her energy and the way she's showing up. And I finished the hypnosis. I felt so empowered, so connected to what was possible for me. And actually, this was more of the ideal version of myself because when I thought of myself in my life, I didn't want to be someone who constantly avoided or ran away and then felt internal discord or discomfort. I wanted to be the woman who could stay in the room, could hold her own, could speak up for herself and her needs, could have those uncomfortable conversations and not be afraid if it challenged someone else, and know that she's still doing it with love and with kindness, but that she wasn't going to tolerate that lower level shit anymore. That was who I wanted to be. So I knew after the hypnosis that I had to start practicing that, right? It's one thing to tap into it, and it's one thing to like program it into your subconscious, but then you have to take the physical action. And I think this is where I had gone wrong for a lot of years, is that I was doing such deep reprogramming work and healing work, but then I still wasn't always acting on it. And sometimes I was still acting from the smaller self and reverting and falling backwards. But in this particular moment, I knew, okay, how does she show up now? How does this new version of me show up? And I walked out of my room. It was the coolest moment ever. I'll never forget it. It was kind of an experiment too. I was like, let's see how quickly this can change, right? So I walked out of my room. I felt so embodied, like shoulders back, head held high, really confident in who I am, and knowing that what I was desiring was not too much to ask. It was literally just the base level of respect. So I was like, you're not in the wrong for wanting to call this in or kind of demanding that this need be met. And I walked out into the general area where everyone was and where I had often been kind of overridden, like that whole invisibility block that I had mentioned of not being seen or heard. And I walked out there, and just with the energetic shift and just with the confidence that I was holding within my body, I walked out into this space. And then I didn't even say anything, but the people, the extended family and my family members, where this had been such a pattern, such a struggle for years, they looked over at me, and it was literally like a cartoon where like the eyes go wide and it's almost like a double take, and I could feel the shift in the energy between us, where there was almost a an energy of like, what the hell just happened? Like, who is this? What's going on? And they were looking over at me, and I was just standing there unfazed, unbothered, literally not saying anything, but just embodying my power and knowing that I deserved to be there and to be seen and stuff like that. And instantaneously, things shifted. And there was kind of a clearing out of the people who had always pushed over the boundaries. The space was kind of returned to its rightful owner, if that makes sense. I'm trying to share this without sharing too many details because I have so much love for everyone that was a part of this, and there's no, good or bad people. It was just an experience where I continued to collapse and play smaller, and other people continued to kind of push further and further to take more space. And I finally had enough. But the coolest part was just the fact that after that one practice, everything changed. And suddenly there was a new level of respect for me, where I wasn't being crossed. I wasn't having like this space being pushed upon all the time, where I was finally able to do the things I wanted to do in that environment instead of hiding away because I didn't feel like I could. And it was just the coolest moment. From that place, like later on, there were really healthy, conscious conversations about boundaries and about space. And I was able to speak up and share, like, this is how I had felt in the past, and I don't like it, and I don't want that to continue, right? We were able to really be honest about the ways things had kind of been and create a healthy dynamic to move forward with. And truly, none of that would have been possible if I hadn't focused on my own inner shift. And this is why I talk about the energetic so often. It's why I talk about your self image and your identity. Because if you don't change, you will repeat the pattern. You will continue to create from your small self. If I didn't change in that moment, this cycle would have repeated because it already repeated for like over a decade, you know? So nothing was going to change unless I changed it. And I think a lot of times, again, especially as really empathetic, heart centered, kind beings, the last thing we want to do is rock the boat. And so we hope that someone else will change. But that's not how it works if you're wanting to be a conscious creator. If you want to be a conscious creator, you have to make the changes. You have to become the version of you that is a match for what you want. So, in this exact example, I couldn't continue to play small, to hide, to be bitter and resentful, but then be in my room. I couldn't continue to blame other people for walking on my boundaries or not respecting me if I was hiding away and not respecting myself. If I wasn't asking for what I wanted and setting a standard that I be respected at that level, then I can't really play the victim and complain about it or blame someone else, right? And yet that's so often what we do just because we don't understand how energetics work, or because we've all been programmed on this planet to feel like a victim and to not realize our co-creative power. But once you understand that, then you can create anything. So I had to shift and stop acting like my small self, and I had to say, if things were already the way I wanted them to be, if I already were empowered and confident in being respected in my voice, in my boundaries, in my space, this is how I would be walking into the room. This is how I'd be holding myself. This is how I'd be speaking up and asking for what I want. This is how I would maintain a balance between like fiery, grounded confidence and also this loving, soft, heart centered nature that I have, right? Realizing I get to become her and I get to set the standard that this is what I tolerate. This is what I expect. This is what I believe we're all capable of. And we can all rise up into the higher versions of ourselves to create a more balanced and more harmonious and healthy environment. So, oh, it's just so incredible when you realize that. And as I mentioned, this is so much of the work I do inside my Empower bundle because it is about the healthy boundary setting, about the throat chakra activations to speak your truth. And one of my favorite activations in there is the God Shield, and it's about this empowered shield of energy, like this protection from God, from the divine creator, to support you in the highest level and really holding those boundaries, no longer being stuck in people pleasing or collapsing, and to take up space and be big and be bold and be all that you're here to be. And you can still be loving and soft while you do that, right? So realizing you don't have to sacrifice your kindness by taking up space. and that it's not about one or the other. You get to be all of it, but you get to command more. So, as I said, the link for Empower is down below as well if you want to check that out. I highly recommend it. It has helped so many women to break through their own energetic and subconscious blocks as well, and go from this disempowered state to really knowing their worth and walking into the room like the queen that they are. And I want that for you too. So please just know that you have the ability to create anything you want, but you've got to raise your standards. You've got to realize you're deserving and worthy, and you've got to start commanding it energetically first. It all starts there first. So I hope this was helpful. I'm sending you so much love. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. And I'll just say at the end here, like years later from this moment of the story I just shared, and it's only gotten better every year. It's only continued to improve because of the work I've done on myself and the work I've continued to do to maintain these standards of what is normal, and to invite people literally through my energy, not even through verbally asking them most of the time. It's just through holding it and holding it down in the energetic grid that then they are rising up to match it, to meet it, and we're able to continue finding a better balance, find a healthier balance as well, because we live in a very codependent world and a very people pleasing world with a lot of toxic relationship imbalances. And so, side note, this isn't about it being like just matching my ego desires and what I think is better. It's like, no, we're just trying to find something that's actually healthy, and it's not a take and siphon and give and sacrifice and abandon, right? Any of those templates, that's not a healthy dynamic in any relationship. So when you shift things internally, you get to create much better things outside of yourself, and it's worth it. It's so worth it, and it's so incredible when you get to see it happening. So I will end that here now, finally. And I'm sending you love, and I will talk to you again soon.